The Heart Killers is very unserious. My hot take is that silly shows also need to be nitpicked, by me specifically. Who am I? I'm a certified internet nitpicker with no accolades, just some person on the internet. Welcome to Very Queer Talk. Let's talk about the Heart Killers. You may be someone who enjoyed the show immensely and found escapism and other good elements that I didn't find. And I think that's amazing. I think that's beautiful, and that's the fun part about entertainment. What makes me happy or what makes me angry might have the opposite effect for you. I do appreciate that it's a queer person who directed this show, and I wish Jojo all the best in his artistry and his growth, and I'm sure we'll see him throughout GMMTV and beyond. This is for fun, and mostly for myself to think out loud on the internet. Honestly, it's a protest of the premise that silly little shows don't need to be nitpicked and don't need to be critiqued. This is my long, big, laborious way of saying, yes, they do. Here's my thing. The silliness of the show, in this case, BL, need to make sense within the world. Some silly shows are very tropey, according to the world of BL. Some silly shows are overtly serious, that they are unserious. Others have actors that make you invested in the show no matter how silly, still consistent, and pretty charming at the end of the day. I don't think that was the case for the Heart Killers. I was gonna make this video halfway through, like I said, and I didn't, but I don't think that would have changed if I made it at episode 6. I think I would have the same observations that I'm having today. It's boring. I had never dreaded a show where the pacing felt so slow and dull that I was already done at the half-hour mark. It doesn't need that 1 hour or more. Every week it got longer and longer. It was trying so hard to be different that it was tropey, but not in a way that was fun or charming. It was common and not different than anything I've seen. Felt like really mass-produced, not as experimental or aesthetic as it was trying to be. So I do like the actors that are in the show. I've seen them in other shows delivering. They can deliver complex, heavy, emotional stories, but somehow it doesn't work with the show. There is a ruggedness with the show. The premise, like, inherently has a lot of ruggedness. The themes it wants to present doesn't match the brand of GMMTV. There's not an arc of turmoil that feels believable. Like, I can't get invested in their pain because they haven't shown enough of it. It feels almost performative. Like, it feels community theater, and I'm not saying that in an insulting way because I have like worked in a community theater and I've seen like incredible actors. I have also seen community theater that wasn't good, and that is what the Heart Killers felt like. I don't think anybody was given the proper time to develop. Maybe like Jung's character was given a little bit, but not enough. Everything feels really performative and undeveloped. Like when Kant for the first time was feeling like he was missing Bison at the bowling alley, it was this weird direction. It felt disingenuous. It's so like matter-of-factly. There's not an emotional depth to the character, which is what is necessary, I think, to make me generally feel invested in the characters. The world is trying to play around with bad and good, morally corrupt, morally non-corrupt, and you know, the contradiction that come with it. There's a line that feels really hard to play with, but it could be done. I've seen it be done, and we've seen it be done. I think the villains are hella shallow and underdeveloped because they don't feel like they're villains. Like, as audiences, we are given like trust when we should not be given trust. That trust is taken away from us when we are asking about like the character depth of like each of the people that are presented to us. I don't think we are inherently supposed to root against or root for just because they present this arc of like, these are the villains, these are the non-villains. That's not enough. The twist is not even that satisfying of a twist, and I mean, like, that's okay. You know, Jack and Joker had very much an obvious twist. It wasn't really even a twist, but it did it in a way that felt like you were invested in the characters because they have established who the characters are and what they care about. Lily killed their parents. Okay, like, we were not even given the proper time to grieve that. Like, it was so rushed. It was almost like everything felt like a plot device. When a director goes into the story and says that this is a bad guy and this is a good guy, there's no contradictions between what is trying to show like what human beings are capable of. The story gets really flattened. Whatever the writer kind of drives the story with this morality wwithout having the exploration of humans as these full-fledged people with layers, it gets way less interesting, I think. It gets overshadowed with the human bias, the righteousness, like I said. It's also deeply personalized to the point where it makes it hard to connect as audience with what we are supposed to root for and what we are supposed to root against. Even though the story sets us up, like the premise of the story sets us up to play around with contradictions, they don't really go into it as much. When the creator is obsessed with this imperative or karmic justice without weighing and seeing the characters weigh it in real time because the writer or the creators already know how this is going to end, the context and the condition of the world they're in makes the world really fucking boring. You're kind of just like, okay, next episode. Okay, next scene. What is going on with the direction? There's a lot of things that have a potential to be better with the Heart Killers, and I feel like the direction was such a big barrier. We couldn't get this complex story about people who are morally corrupt and contradictory by the standards of whatever normalcy is. Yet it's still trying to, play around with this idea of desire and companionship, fulfillment, contributing in a way that makes sense in their own world. This is a solid premise on its own, and there's so much potential to play around with that. Like, we don't need anything more complicated than that. Again, like, it's already a tricky business trying to roll out stories of people who have this incredible, tumultuous and varying circumstances of like life, environments, and trauma. Another thing that's so hard to do, but I have seen it be done well, refers to shows that I have reviewed on this channel. The lighting of the scenes usually communicate the mood of the scene and the show and the characters' feelings, and also the context of the environment. Yet it's so sanitized because it's GMM TV, it's hard to understand this supposedly dark and gritty show about people that are morally questionable. Compared to something like Jack and Joker, although it still sometimes has a tendency to remind us we're watching a highly produced show. In Jack and Joker, there's still an intention to play around with the key lighting or the diffusion of the scene or the composition that communicates how we should be feeling at the moment. I don't think there's a lot of that or any at all in the Heart Killers, and that makes me really sad. The direction is, I don't know how to best put this, is weird. Everything feels so rigid, like over-calculated. People are reading the script. I mean, I know that's what they're doing ultimately, but I don't want to be knowing that as an audience. There are stories that do that better than this show. And I'm not like trying to say everything has to be perfect in order for a show to be fun, but the charm was taken away because it feels like the characters are so rigid and stiff in the way that they even communicate with each other. I also feel like the scene setup is so poorly done that it took me out of the moment so many times. There are shows that do this very well. Scene setup is not a silly little thing. I think it says a lot about the world that we are being introduced to, the intention. It also says a lot about what the direction is intending to reveal to us as audiences. The thing is, the scenes are so poorly paced or fleshed out. Significant moments such as Style being vulnerable about his mom's passing, Fidel being honest about his parents' loss, or his partner leaving doesn't really have any significance because it comes out of nowhere. Like, there's not a lot of build-up. Like, the tone shift, I guess, doesn't really make much sense. Like, there's not really a build-up to it. Ooh, I was like talking about this to my sister. The exposition is shared so poorly. It kind of takes you out of the moment. The Heart Killers and many shows that feel generally dull suffer from, like, I learned recently, as it's called like over-exposition. Over-exposition is when a creator is trying to over-communicate to the point where it feels like an autobiographical or like a memoir rather than an interesting dynamic story that you're trying to consume. You have to trust your audiences, and whenever creators do over exposition, it makes me think twice about if they really trust their audiences. But let's just say that you don't, which is, I guess, fine. Why does it feel like I'm being waterboarded with like origin stories of characters in one sitting rather than learning it in a more organic manner, like where it's laid out little by little? The actors are not directed. Like, I don't know how to say it, but like, the actors are not directed. Even in Only Friends, they were able to direct the actors. Even though I didn't love Only Friends, the direction felt like a lot stronger. They feel distant from their own characters, so as audiences, we don't feel connected with the characters. We are more like watching Jung, Dong, and Kotong and First stumble through a script and not their characters. I also have noticed in shows that are not as well fleshed out, characters wear their flaws and motivations like honor badges instead of showing up like how they're mostly corrupt, because, you know, what is that saying? Tell, not show. There's a lot of pacing that feels like it's disjointed. It feels really lackluster. There was nothing that marked time shifting or moments shifting. It was so unclear. It was so confusing. I just was filled with blanks. Good audience would. It's like we're making a whole show with crew and everything, yet we're not delivering what we're supposed to do. Okay. I think they also abused a lot of the common tropes. I think it's okay to play with tropes. Tropes are fun, but it was so predictable to the point that it got really dull and boring. How wildly different would it be if Fidel took Style and injured him right after he finds out that, like, yeah, like he was kind of like mad, but like it was not believable. It's also not consistent with Fidel being that character. He's very cold and distant, but that's not how he was acting. It just didn't make any fucking sense. Okay, Jung, Kao, First, or Dong are very hot people. Love seeing them, don't get me wrong. The creators, however, chose not to focus on the most interesting part of the story, the inner turmoil of each of the characters, of them trying to live between the lie and their authentic self, in which case it causes us as audience to have this cognitive dissonance of what's reality and what's really manufactured. Fidel, like for instance, Jung's character, is probably the only character who we see like a glimpse of who he is before and during and after by at least episode 4, and kind of gets dropped after that. There's a lot of plot holes that it did not really make sense with the consistency of who Fidel is, for instance. It was weird how he decided to accept Style and his sketchy self without really interrogating his intention, even though nothing seems reliably true. I feel like that process could have gone longer. Maybe they wanted skinship like early on or something, not to assume. Kant is a bad friend. Can we just say that? This is a safe space. I think the friendship between Kant and Style is not believable, like at all. He put Style in harm's way for his own benefit. I mean, I know he was being like hunted by the detective or whatever. See, there's like stuff that he's trying to figure out and like make sure that he's not going to be imprisoned, and like he wants to make sure that his brother has like a guardian and stuff like that. Totally. It's still selfish. What am I supposed to feel touched by? Am I supposed to be on Khan's side? Am I supposed to feel bad for Style? A character who hasn't shown like a semblance of empathy or normal human reactions to things like betrayal and other human emotions. Like, fucking man. Like, a lot of these scenes feel like they're strung together and don't have much significance, which makes us as audiences, I think, lost and also not attached to what's actually happening. The world building is poor. When they find out the person behind their parents' death, the significance of the moment is reduced because there's not a heaviness to the moment. We don't know them. We don't know them, you know? The music is telling me to feel something, and I'm not attached to these characters and don't have the context for what I should be feeling, and therefore I don't feel anything except confusion, annoyance, and I just want to leave. Like, I'm given stories that feel like bits and pieces of information that is revealed not with a lot of intent or connection or like an arc that connects them all. I feel like someone is just telling me a story about things that are vaguely connected and is forcing me to understand how important they are. And I'm like locked in a room. Let's talk about the finale, okay? Did they land the finale? Kind of. The pacing is incoherent. Styles' dad has retired. They were kind of marking the time they were in prison. But like outside of that, I didn't know, like a year, how long are they seeing each other? It felt really rushed. I think they should have started having them in prison in like maybe an episode 11, and it could have improved the pacing a little bit more. I thought when I originally saw the preview, Kant and Style were gonna be in prison with them because no trust in the show, but it's a little less insulting, I guess. Stupid still, don't get me wrong, but less stupid. Okay, since you waited this long, I am gonna tell you things I liked. I'm not gonna just leave you with sad things. The styling of the characters is good. It's solid and consistent with the world. Yeah, inspired by the American retro diner culture with the poppy colors, bowling alley, very cute. Like, I feel like JoJo does aesthetics really well, but I fear he might be doing aesthetics a little too well and not focus on the other stuff. I said I'm gonna tell you things I like. Let's continue. The music is forgettable, not connected to anything, but some of the songs, fun songs, love it. The vibes are good. It's a show that's vibey. It's a show that's vibey, and maybe that's what they made that to be. But am I gonna remember in a year? Probably not. I think my favorite part of this whole show, the dude that was trading pack of cigs for watching the guards as people have sex, a real one. He had maybe less than 2 minutes of screen time, but he killed that role. I think he had more character depth than anybody in that show, and I'll say that again. This was actually like a pleasantly surprising thing that I didn't see happening. Jung's acting is actually improved, and I think he was my favorite character. There was a lot of directing that did not go well, but I think he's improved. He's deepened. Like his acting. Like, yay. Period. Like, from 2 Months Day, night and day, babes. I actually like Jung's characterization. I think he had the most consistent characterization. He's also the most fleshed out, even though he could be more fleshed out, but we talked about that already. He's clearly an avoidant who has been burnt before, and someone who's been a caretaker all his life for his brother, and he doesn't expect anything from people. And he's relatable, I think. He's the most human character. I found him the most interesting out of everybody. The poison Lily had on the table to kill everyone with, why did it have a skeleton? That was camp. That was camp. I love that so much. What would have made it even stronger? If they were able to have a stronger community outside of the romantic relationship they have with each other. I love when shows, specifically GMM TV, has other system of friends, an ecosystem of neighbors. I think when they do that, they always like are so much better than having the romantic focus. Even though it's a BL, you're able to make community of friends, like, hello. And that is the best part about the show. When you create something, the reaction to the world that the people that are the focal points is the most interesting part of like a story. That is what creates depth a lot of the time. The focal point being the four made the show and the story shallow. Speaking of formulaic, I wish every scene felt a little bit more organic and they would have taken more time. I don't know what the timeline of this whole show was to film it, to do pre-production and all of that, but whatever is on the script, they said copy paste and made it possible, and it didn't make it stronger. If characters were more fleshed out and we were able to understand them even deeper, I think that would have been more fun. Okay, bye.